If you've been thinking about starting a garden, but every time you look it up, you end up more confused than when you started, I want you to sit down right here and listen to me. Because there is a good chance that everything making this feel complicated is not actually complicated. It's just being explained by people who forgot what it felt like to not know anything yet. I'm going to take you from bare ground or bare backyard or bare balcony, whatever you've got, all the way to food coming out of the soil. And I'm not going to skip a single step or assume you already know something I haven't taught you yet. My name is Anna Mae Wagler. I am Amish, and I farm in the Milverton settlement up in Perth County, Ontario. I've had dirt under my fingernails since before I could spell my own name. My mother grew food. Her mother grew food. Her mother's mother grew food. And not one of them ever read a gardening blog or watched a video to learn how. They learned by doing it wrong, then doing it again, then showing the next girl how to do it a little less wrong the first time. So that's what I'm going to do with you today. Here's what I'm promising you. By the end of this, you'll know where to put a garden, what to put it in, what soil to buy and what soil to avoid, and exactly why. What to plant right now and what to wait on. How to get plants in the ground the right way, and how to start seeds from nothing so you never have to buy a plant again if you don't want to. Well, that's the whole thing. That's a garden. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I'm going to show you a trick with logs and sticks that'll cut the amount of soil you need to buy clean in half. Most people don't hear about that one until they've already spent the money. So, stick with me. Now, before we put a single thing in the ground, I need to talk to you about the one decision that everything else depends on. And I mean everything. You can buy the best soil in the world, the prettiest raised beds, the healthiest little plants, and if you get this part wrong, none of it matters. I've watched it happen. I've watched people spend good money in real time and end up frustrated, and every single time, every time it comes back to this one thing, where you put it. That's the whole game right at the start. Where does the garden go? Now, there's two sides to this. The first side is simple. How close is it to your kitchen door? And I know that sounds like a small thing, but I promise you it's not. Because the garden you actually use is the garden you can get to without thinking about it. If you're standing at the stove and you need basil and the basil is right out the back door, you'll walk out and grab it. But if it's at the far end of the yard and it's raining or it's dark or you're tired, you won't. You'll just skip it. And then you skip it again. And then eventually that garden becomes a chore instead of a habit, and chores that don't get done don't feed anyone. So put it close as you reasonably can. The second side is the one that trips people up, and it's about the sun. This is the part most folks get wrong. So let me explain it plainly, because once you understand this, you'll never second guess your placement again. The sun rises in the east, sets in the west, and throughout the day it swings across the southern part of the sky. Now I'm here in the northern hemisphere, so that's how it works for me and for most of you watching. If you're down in Australia or New Zealand or South Africa, it's the northern sky for you. Same principle, just flip it. But wherever you are, the sun takes a path, and everything between you and that path makes a shadow. Your house casts a shadow. Your fence casts a shadow. That big maple tree your grandfather planted casts a shadow. And that shadow moves throughout the day. In the summer, it's shorter. In the winter, it's longer. And if your garden is sitting in that shadow for most of the day, your plants are starving, not for water, not for food, for light. Now here's the thing, not every plant needs the same amount of light. Your lettuces, your spinach, your herbs, they can handle some shade. They'll still grow. But your tomatoes, your peppers, your squash, those need full sun. They want 6, 8, 10 hours of direct light. And if they don't get it, they'll sit there looking sad and barely producing anything. And you'll think you did something wrong when really you just put them in the wrong spot. So step outside, figure out where east is, figure out where south is. Watch where the shadows fall at midday and put your garden in the spot that gets the most sun for the longest stretch of the day. If your whole yard is shady, don't panic. I'll show you something in just a minute that helps with that. but pick the brightest spot you've got. Now, here's what I mean about working with shade instead of fighting it. If you're growing something on the ground right up against a fence or a wall, and that wall casts a shadow, your plant is sitting in the dark. But if you raise that plant up, if you get it higher off the ground, it clears that shadow line. The shadow's still there. It's just down below where the plant is. And suddenly your plant is back in the sun. That's why we're going to use raised beds. And we're going to use tall ones. Now, you can grow a garden 100 different ways. You can dig right into the ground if your soil is good enough. You can use pots and containers. You can use old stock tanks or wooden crates or anything that holds dirt. But raised beds, particularly tall raised beds, they solve a lot of problems at once. They clear shade, they save your back, they keep the soil loose and well drained. They give you edges to lean on, and if you've got ground that's full of clay or rock or old construction fill, you don't have to fight it. You just build above it. You can build them out of wood, you can build them out of metal, you can scrounge up old fence boards or pallets or cinder blocks and do it for next to nothing. What matters isn't the material. What matters is that it holds soil, it drains, and it's tall enough for roots to grow deep. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to pretend the only way to do this is the expensive way. Where I come from, we don't throw money at things when there's a perfectly good solution sitting in the scrap pile. So if you've got wood, use wood. If you've got stone, use stone. If you've got nothing but old tires and determination, I've seen people grow beautiful food in worse. But whatever you use, here's a number I want you to remember. 30 inches. That's how much space you want between your beds. Between one bed and the next, leave 30 inches. That gives you room to walk, room to kneel, room to bring a wheelbarrow through if you need to, room to actually work without stepping on what you're trying to grow. I've seen people push their beds right up against each other because they wanted more growing space, and then they can't reach the middle of anything without climbing in. Don't do that. 30 inches. Now, placement. Once your beds are built or set up or arranged, however you're doing it, take a minute. Don't just drop them and start filling. Walk into your garden space, stand in it, look at it. How does it feel? Can you move through it easily? Can you reach each bed from at least two sides? Does the layout make sense for the way you'll actually use it? Because here's the thing, you're going to be in this garden almost every day. Watering, harvesting, checking on things, pulling a weed, just looking. And if the layout annoys you even a little, that annoyance builds up. So move things around. Try them one way, try them another. Think about it like furniture in a room. You wouldn't just shove a couch against the first wall and leave it forever. You'd try a few arrangements until it felt right. Same thing here. And if you've got two beds running parallel to each other, think about this. You could put a trellis between them. Run a simple arch from one to the other. Grow cucumbers or beans or peas over the top, and suddenly you've got this living tunnel you walk through to get to the back of your garden. It's beautiful, it's productive, and it uses vertical space, which means you're growing more food in the same footprint. Now, I want to talk about filling these beds because this is where most people's wallets start to hurt, and it doesn't have to be that way. Let me do the math with you because I think math is the part that scares people off, and it shouldn't. It's just multiplication. Say you've got a bed that's 2 feet wide, 7 feet long, and 30 inches tall, 2.5 feet tall, roughly. You take the width times the length times the height. 2 times 7 is 14. 14 times 2.5 is 35. Call it roughly 34 cubic feet. That's the volume of soil you need to fill just that one bed. Now, if you've got 2 of those beds, you need 68 cubic feet. If you've got 4 beds in your garden, you could be looking at over 100 cubic feet of soil. And soil is not cheap, especially good soil. And I'm going to tell you right now, do not cheap out on your soil. That is the one thing in this whole process where spending a little more saves you a lot of pain later. But here's the trick I promised you. Most plants, their roots go down maybe 12, 15 inches. Some go a bit more, but most of your vegetables and herbs, that's about the range. They don't need 30 inches of soil. They just need the top half. So what do you do with the bottom half? You fill it with logs, sticks, branches, twigs, Whatever you can get your hands on. If you've got a wood pile, grab the stuff you weren't going to burn anyway. If your neighbor just trimmed a tree, ask for the branches. If you've got a scrap heap of old lumber that's untreated, toss it in. It's free, it takes up space, and over time it breaks down and actually feeds the soil above it. That one trick cuts your soil bill in half, right in half. And here's another thing for the very bottom. Before the logs go in, lay down cardboard. Just plain cardboard from your boxes, your deliveries, whatever you've got. It suppresses weeds from coming up through the bottom. It gives gophers and moles a harder time getting in. And just like the logs, it breaks down over time and adds to the soil. You're turning waste into structure. That's not a hack. That's just good sense. Now, when you're putting the logs in, don't worry about stacking them neatly. Wedge a couple into the corners to anchor the bed so it doesn't shift. Then just fill the rest in however they fit. There'll be air pockets between them, and that's fine. Over time, the wood breaks down, the soil settles into those gaps, and the surface drops a little. When that happens, just add a bit more soil on top. It's not a problem. It's just the bed settling in. Same way a new house settles. All right. Now let me talk to you about soil because this is where I see people get confused. And it's not their fault. The bags at the nursery, the garden center, the hardware store, they all look the same and they all have different names, and nobody explains the difference. So I'm going to, there are 3 things soil needs to do for a plant. 3 things and only 3. First, it needs fertility. That's the food. The nutrients the plant eats to grow, that comes from compost, from worm castings, from things like alfalfa meal or bone meal or kelp meal. All those ingredients you see listed on the back of the bag. Second, it needs drainage. That's the ability for water to move through the soil and out the bottom. If water just sits there in pools, your roots rot. They drown. Drainage comes from things like bark, perlite, those little white porous pieces you've probably seen, and coarse sand. Third, it needs retention. That's the ability for soil to hold on to some of that water long enough for the roots to drink it. If it all drains out instantly, the plant goes thirsty. Retention comes from peat moss or coconut coir, which is shredded coconut husk. Both of them soak up water like a sponge and hold it in the soil. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Fertility, drainage, retention. That's the recipe for good soil. And here's how you check. Turn the bag around. Read the ingredients. If you see compost or green waste, that's your fertility. If you see bark or perlite or sand, that's your drainage. If you see peat moss or coconut coir, that's your retention. If all 3 are there, you're holding a good bag of soil. Now here's where people go wrong. And I want to tell you this because honesty is worth more to me than impressive. There's a type of soil called garden soil or just compost. And a lot of beginners buy it because the name sounds right. It says garden right on it. Sometimes it even has a picture of vegetables. But if you flip it over and read the ingredients, you'll see it's mostly just fertility. Composted green waste, sawdust, some meals. It's got the food, but it's missing the drainage and the retention. It's not a potting mix. It's an amendment, something you add to other soil to improve it. If you fill a bed with nothing but that, your plants won't die, but they won't thrive. The soil will compact, water won't move through it properly, and you'll spend the whole season wondering what you did wrong. What you want is a raised bed potting mix or a standard potting mix, either one. The label will usually say something like ready to plant or complete growing mix. That's the one. And if you're on a tight budget, I get it. I've been on a tight budget my whole life. Buy the best soil you can for as much of the garden as you can. If you have to mix in some of the cheaper stuff to fill the rest, that's okay. But whatever you do, don't fill the whole thing with the cheap stuff. I've seen people do that, and then a year later, they're digging it all out and replacing it. And they've spent more than they would have if they'd just bought the good stuff to begin with. So spend your money on soil. If there's one place in this whole project where I'm telling you not to cut corners, this is it. Now, I see on these bags these 3 numbers, and I know some of you have seen those too and wondered what they mean. They're called NPK. Stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are the 3 nutrients plants need the most. Nitrogen is what drives leaf growth. Big, green, lush leaves, that's nitrogen doing the work. So your lettuces, your spinach, your kale, they love nitrogen. Phosphorus helps with roots and flowers and fruit. So when a plant is trying to make a tomato or a pepper or a strawberry, phosphorus is what it's reaching for. Potassium is for overall plant health. It helps with disease resistance, water regulation, all the behind-the-scenes work. Most good potting mixes have a balanced ratio of all three. You don't need to obsess over the numbers right now. Just know that if you're growing leafy greens, they want more nitrogen. And if you're growing fruit, the plant will want more phosphorus and potassium as it matures. But the soil you buy will have enough of everything to get you started. You can always add more later. We'll get to that another day. Now, before we go any further, I want to take a moment. This channel doesn't have sponsors. I'm not selling you a product. I don't have a store. I just want the old ways to reach the people who were never taught them. And there are a lot of you out there. The only way this reaches more of those people is if you tap that subscribe button, because that's how it knows to keep showing this to folks like you. That's all I'm asking. Now let's get back to work. Let's talk about plants. You've got your beds in place. You've got your soil in. Now you need to decide what goes in the ground. And this is where I see people make one of two mistakes. Either they buy everything that looks exciting and end up with a chaotic mess that nothing grows well in, or they buy nothing because they're paralyzed by all the choices and they're afraid of doing it wrong. I'm going to make this simple for you. Start with what you eat. That's it. What do you eat? What do you buy at the grocery store every week? Herbs, lettuce, tomatoes, peppers. Start there. Don't plant something because you think you're supposed to. Plant it because you're going to walk outside and pick it and use it. Now, here's the thing about timing, and I'll get deeper into this in a minute, but you need to know this right now. Not everything can go in the ground at the same time. Some plants are cool season crops. They like it cool. They grow in the spring and the fall. Lettuce, spinach, kale, cabbage, peas, onions, those go in when it's still cold outside. If you try to grow lettuce in July, it bolts. It sends up a flower stalk and goes bitter, and it's done. Other plants are warm season crops: tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, squash, beans. They want heat. They want warm soil and long days. If you plant a tomato in January, it's going to sit there and sulk, or freeze, or just quietly die. So the question isn't just what do I want to grow, it's what can I grow right now? And the answer depends on where you are and what month it is. If you're in the middle of winter, plant your cool season crops: lettuce, spinach, kale, cabbage. Start your warm season seeds indoors so they're ready when the weather turns. If you're in the middle of summer, it's the other way around. But wherever you are, there's something you can plant right now. There's always something. Now let's start putting things in the ground, and I'm going to go bed by bed the way you'd actually do it so you can follow along, even if your garden looks nothing like what I'm describing. We'll start with herbs, because herbs are the easiest thing you can grow, the hardest thing to get wrong, and probably the thing you'll use the most. Here's what you need to know about most of the herbs you're going to grow: rosemary, oregano, thyme, sage, basil, parsley. Most of these are Mediterranean herbs. And what does the Mediterranean climate look like? Sunny, warm, not a lot of rain. These are tough plants. They don't need much water. They don't need much fertilizer. They just need sun and decent soil, and to be left mostly alone. So put your herb bed in the sunniest spot you've got and put it close to the kitchen, because you're going to use these more than anything else in your garden. Trust me on that. When you're making supper and you step outside and snip off a branch of rosemary or a handful of basil, that alone is worth every bit of work you put into this. Now, when you're planting herbs, think about how each one grows. This is called its growing habit, and it matters for placement. Rosemary, the upright varieties, they grow tall and narrow, almost like a little column. So don't put that right at the front of your bed where it's going to block your view of everything behind it. Put it toward the back. Oregano and thyme, those are ground creepers. They spread out low and flat, and they'll cascade over the edge of a bed. And honestly, that looks beautiful. Put those near the edges. Sage grows into a nice bushy mound, not too tall, not too low. Put it somewhere in the middle or toward a side. Parsley is a good centerpiece for a small herb bed. It's compact, it's useful, and it sits at a nice middle height. And basil, well, basil can get big, really big. If you let a basil plant go, it'll turn into a bush the size of a small child. So give it some room. And here's a tip that most people don't know. When you buy basil from the nursery or even from the grocery store, what looks like one plant is usually 5, 6, 7 plants, all growing in the same little pot. They do that to make it look bushy for the shelf. But all those stems are competing for the same nutrients and the same space. Here's what I would do. If you want a big productive basil bush, pick the strongest looking stem and cut the rest away. Use the stems you cut in your cooking that night, don't waste them. Then let that one strong stem grow. And when you see 2 little leaves branching out from the stem, prune right above them. That forces the plant to branch out sideways. 2 stems become 4, 4 become 8. And in a couple of weeks, you've got a massive bush of basil from one plant. That's the thing about herbs. Once they're in, it's mostly about maintenance, using them regularly, pruning them back so they keep producing new growth, and not overwatering them, especially the Mediterranean ones. They come from a dry climate. They don't want wet feet. If you're watering your herbs every day, you're probably watering them too much. Let the soil dry out between waterings. They'll be happier. And here's something else. If you pull a plant out of its pot and the roots are all tangled and circling around the bottom, break them up a bit. Don't be gentle about it either. You can be rougher than you think. Just pull them apart, loosen them up. That tells the roots to spread out into the new soil instead of just continuing to circle in the same tight ball. They'll establish faster that way. And one more thing. When you pop a plant out of its pot, if it smells bad, like something sour or rotten, that means the soil has gone anaerobic. The oxygen's gone out of it and bad bacteria have moved in. Break it up, give it air, and don't water it for a day or 2. Let it breathe. It'll recover. All right, now I want to talk about strawberries because strawberries are one of the most rewarding things you can grow at home, and almost everyone does one thing wrong with them. And I'm going to tell you what it is right now so you don't make the same mistake. There are 2 main types of strawberry plants, June-bearing and ever-bearing, and the name tells you almost everything you need to know. June-bearing strawberries produce one big flush of fruit, usually in June or early summer, depending on where you are. The berries are big. They're gorgeous. They're the kind of strawberry that makes you wonder why you ever bought one from a store. But they only fruit once. Ever-bearing strawberries produce 2 or 3 smaller flushes throughout the growing season. The berries are smaller, but you get them over a longer stretch of time. If you want those big, ridiculous, juice running down your chin strawberries, go with June-bearing. Now here's the mistake almost everyone makes. They plant their strawberries and then they let them flower right away. They see those little white flowers and they get excited and they let them go. And the plant puts all its energy into making a few tiny, disappointing berries in January or February, when it should be growing leaves. Here's what I want you to do instead. When you plant your strawberries, cut off every single flower. I know it feels wrong. It feels like you're throwing away the whole point. But listen to me. Those flowers are asking the plant to do something it's not ready to do yet. The plant is small. Its root system is small. It doesn't have enough energy stored up to make good fruit. If you let it try, you get sad little berries and a weak plant. But if you cut those flowers off, the plant has no choice but to put all that energy into growing leaves. And what do leaves do? They collect sunlight. They turn that sunlight into energy. The more leaves, the more energy. The more energy, the bigger the plant gets. And when June rolls around and you finally stop pruning the flowers, that plant is massive. It's an engine. And it's going to put out an incredible amount of huge, beautiful strawberries. You can keep pruning flowers all the way until the beginning of May. That's 4 months of growth the plant gets to just build itself up. Then in May, stop pruning. Let every flower stay. And in June, you'll be out there every morning finding berries you swear weren't there the day before, hidden under the leaves. You'll have to go hunting for them, and every one of them will be worth the wait. Now, when you plant strawberries, there's one thing you have to get right, and it's about the crown. See where the new leaves come out at the top of the plant? But That little cluster right at the center, that's the crown. And you have to keep it above the soil line. If you bury the crown, if you pack soil up over it, it rots. And if the crown rots, the plant is dead. So plant it so the roots are covered, but the crown is sitting above the dirt. Press the soil down around it firmly because you don't want air pockets around the roots, but keep that crown up and clear. Space them out evenly in your bed. They need room because they're going to send out runners. A runner is a long stem that shoots out from the mother plant, and at the end of it, a new little plant forms. It touches the soil, puts down roots, and now you've got a new strawberry plant for free. You can even cut it loose from the mother plant and move it wherever you want. That's how strawberries multiply. They're generous like that. All right, let's move on to your greens, your lettuce, your spinach, your kale. This is probably the lowest stress planting you'll do. Greens are forgiving, they grow fast, and there aren't a lot of rules. Now, when you buy seedlings from the nursery, you're paying for time. That's really what you're buying. A 6-pack of vegetable starts might cost you $7. A 6-pack of herbs, maybe $6.50. A packet of seeds costs a couple of bucks and has hundreds of seeds in it, but that seedling is already 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old, sometimes more. You didn't have to keep it alive through the fiddly early stage. Someone else did that for you. And if you're a beginner, that time savings is real. Because starting seeds, I'll teach you how in just a few minutes, but it takes practice. You might start some and lose them. That's normal. But a seedling from the nursery is already going. It's already alive. You
This
just put it
plant
in
is
the
alive,
ground
it is ready,
and let
you
it
just
keep
put it in
growing.
the ground.
So,
The hardest
for
part
your
is
first
already
garden,
done.
I'd say do both. Buy seedlings for the things you want to eat soon and start seeds for the things you want to grow later in the season, your tomatoes, your peppers, things like that. Now for your lettuce bed, here's how I think about it. If you're planting romaine lettuce, give each plant about 6 to 12 inches of space. Romaine grows upright, and it needs room to form that tall, tight head. If you're planting leaf lettuce or spinach, you can crowd them a little closer because you're going to harvest them young and often. You can plant the same variety in a row, or you can mix different types together. Mixing looks nice and gives you variety when you harvest. Rows are easier to manage and make succession planting simpler. It's up to you. There's no wrong answer. And here's the thing about planting everything at the same time. If you put 12 lettuce plants in the ground on the same day, they're all going to be ready on the same day. And unless you eat a lot of salad, that's more lettuce than you can use at once. So I'd recommend staggering. Plant some now, plant more in a week or two, then more a couple weeks after that. That way, you've always got some that's ready to eat and some that's still growing. It stretches your harvest out over months instead of giving you one big pile all at once. And when you're arranging plants in a bed, here's a spacing trick. Instead of putting them in a straight grid, stagger them, offset every other row so the plants sit in the gaps between the ones in front of them, like the dots on the 5 side of a die. That way, each plant gets a little more room to grow because they're not directly shoulder to shoulder. It's more efficient use of the space. Now let's talk about cabbage because cabbage is a different animal than lettuce. Cabbage is a big plant. It needs space. The tag on most cabbage seedlings will tell you to space them 18 inches apart. And I want you to follow that. Not 12, not 14, 18. Here's why. Cabbage grows by putting out these wide, flat outer leaves that spread out like a skirt. Those leaves are collecting sunlight to feed the head that's forming in the center. If you crowd your cabbages and those outer leaves overlap and compete, the heads stay small and tight, and you end up disappointed. Now, the way to think about 18-inch spacing when you've got multiple plants is 9 inches on each side. So if plant A is here and plant B is there, 9 inches of space on each side adds up to 18 between them. And here's a little trick. If a plant is next to the edge of the bed, you can cheat that spacing. There's nothing growing on the other side of the edge, so you don't need the full 9 inches of buffer. Scoot it a little closer to the wall and give the extra room to the interior of the bed. One more thing about cabbage. The stems on seedlings are thin and floppy. They look fragile, and they are. So when you plant them, bury the stem a little deeper than it was in the pot. That gives it stability and encourages new roots to form along the buried part of the stem. Same thing with kale, by the way. Kale is actually the same species as cabbage. Same plant, different expression. So bury those stems just a touch deeper than where they were, and they'll stand up straighter and root in faster. Now, here's a part most people skip, or they hear about it and they think it sounds too complicated. It's not. I promise. Let me show you how to start seeds. This is the part that turns you from someone who gardens into someone who grows. There's a difference. A gardener buys plants and puts them in the ground. A grower makes the plants. And once you know how to start seeds, you have access to every variety of every vegetable and every herb and every flower that exists. You're not limited to whatever the nursery happens to have in stock that week. And it's cheaper, way cheaper. A packet of seeds, $2-3, has enough seeds to plant a whole bed. A 6-pack of starts costs more than that and gives you 6 plants. The math is simple, so here's how you do it. You need a seed starting tray. They make these little 6-cell packs like a tiny muffin tin. Each cell holds 1 plant. You can buy them at any garden center or hardware store. They're cheap. You fill them with seedling mix, not regular potting soil. Seedling mix, it's finer, lighter, softer. The tiny roots of a brand new plant can push through it easily. Regular potting soil has bark and big chunks in it that can block a seedling's root. So use the fine stuff for starting. Now you take your seed. Make a little depression in the center of each cell. Just push your finger in about 1/4 of an inch, that's all. Drop 1 seed in, cover it up, gently. Don't pack it hard. If you want insurance, you can put 2 seeds in each cell. That way, if one doesn't germinate, the other one probably will. But if you're planting all 6 cells, 1 per cell is usually enough. You'll get at least a few. And that brings me to something I need to tell you. And this is important. Not every seed germinates. Some don't make it. That's normal. It's not a failure. It's just how seeds work. Even in perfect conditions, you're not going to get 100%. So, plant a few more than you think you need, and don't take it personally when some of them don't come up. This is one of those places where I would rather you trust me than be impressed by me. I've been starting seeds for decades, and I still lose some every year. It's just part of it. Now, once your seeds are in the tray, you need 2 things: moisture and warmth. Water the tray gently. You don't want to flood it. There's barely any soil in those little cells. And at this stage, there's no root to absorb a lot of water. You just want the mix to be damp, moist, not soaking. Think of a wrung-out sponge. That's the moisture level you're going for. Then put the tray somewhere warm. Room temperature is perfect, about 70 degrees. Not on a cold windowsill, not in a drafty garage, somewhere that stays consistently warm. Seeds are triggered to sprout by moisture and heat. If they don't get both, they'll just sit there. And here's something people don't realize. Seeds don't need light to sprout. There's nothing above the soil yet. There's no leaf to collect light. So for the first few days, it doesn't matter if the tray is in the dark. What matters is that it's warm and moist. But the moment you see a little green sprout poking up out of the soil, move that tray into the light, because now there's a leaf. And that leaf needs light like it needs air. Give it 8 to 12 hours of light a day. A sunny windowsill can work, but if you're somewhere with short winter days or cloudy weather, it might not be enough. And here's a sign that your seedlings aren't getting enough light. They get tall and spindly, leggy. They're reaching for the light, stretching toward it, and they end up thin and weak. If you see that happening, they need more light, or the light needs to be closer. You can use a shop light. A simple fluorescent or LED shop light hung a few inches above the seedlings. It doesn't have to be a fancy grow light. It just has to be close and on for a good stretch of the day. That'll keep them stocky and strong. And keep the soil moist, not wet. People kill more seedlings with water than with anything else. Those little roots are tiny. They can only absorb so much. If the soil is saturated, the roots sit in water and they rot, and then the seedling just falls over one day and it's done. Now here's where timing matters. Some seedlings are ready to go in the ground after about 2 weeks. Your lettuce, spinach, bok choy, your bunching onions. They can handle going outside relatively young. But others need more time. Your tomatoes, your peppers, those might take a month or more before they're big enough and strong enough to go outside. And in the meantime, they might outgrow those little 6-cell trays. When that happens, pop them out gently and move them into a slightly bigger pot, a 3-inch or 4-inch pot. Let them keep growing. And when the weather's right, when it's warm enough and the frost is done, that's when you transplant them into the garden. And here's a key point for those of you in colder climates. Up here in Ontario, I'm not putting tomatoes outside until at least late May, sometimes early June. My last frost date is well into May. But someone down in Texas or Southern California or the Gulf Coast might be transplanting in March or April. Know your last frost date. It's the single most important number for your garden calendar. You can look it up by your postal code or your zip code, and from there you count backwards. If your tomato needs 8 weeks of growing time indoors before transplant, and your last frost is May 15th, then you start your seeds around the middle of March. That's the math. Now, let me tell you something about reading the back of a seed packet, because there's good information on there that people skip. The packet will tell you how deep to plant the seed. Follow it. Some seeds want a 1/4 inch, some want a full inch, some, especially certain flowers, want to be pressed lightly into the surface and not buried at all. If the packet says press into the surface, don't bury it. They need light to germinate. It'll tell you the spacing, how far apart to plant them once they're in the garden. It'll tell you the days to germination, how long until you should see a sprout, and it'll tell you the days to maturity, how long from planting to harvest. All of that is on the back of a $2 seed packet, and nobody reads it. Read it. Now, I want to talk about something that I see happen over and over, and it breaks my heart. Every time someone starts a garden, they buy the beds, the soil, the plants, they put it all together, it looks beautiful, and then 2 months later, it's overgrown, the plants are struggling, and they've lost interest, and they feel like they failed. They didn't fail. They just didn't know what to do after the planting. A garden is not a project. It's a relationship. You don't build it and walk away. You build it and then you show up every day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. Walk out there, look at your plants, touch the soil. Is it dry? Water it. Are there weeds? Pull them. Is something getting eaten by bugs? Look closer. Figure out what's eating it. That 5 minutes a day is the difference between a garden that feeds you and a garden that disappoints you. It's not about having a green thumb. There is no such thing as a green thumb. There's just paying attention. That's the whole secret. Now, I want to take a moment because this is the part that matters. You might be wondering why any of this feels hard in the first place. Why do so many people feel like they need a guide to do something that human beings have been doing for 10,000 years? And the answer is uncomfortable, but it's true. There's no money in teaching someone to grow their own food. Not real money. Not for the people who sell food. Not for the companies that sell fertilizers and pest sprays and pre-made salad mixes. Every head of lettuce you grow in your backyard is a head of lettuce nobody sold you. Every tomato you pick off your own vine is a tomato you didn't buy in a plastic clamshell from a truck that drove it 1,500 miles. There's good money in a thing you buy every week. There's no money in a thing you grow once and keep growing forever. So this knowledge, this basic, simple human knowledge of how to grow food, it got quietly pushed out of everyday life, not with a conspiracy, not with some secret meeting, just with convenience, just with a slow forgetting. One generation didn't teach the next because the grocery store was right there. And the grocery store was right there because someone was making good money keeping it right there. My mother's mother never bought a head of lettuce in her life. She didn't need to. She knew how to grow one. But somehow, in 2 generations, that knowledge almost disappeared. And now you're sitting here watching a video to learn what every 12-year-old used to know. I don't say that to shame you. I say it because you should know that this is yours. This skill belongs to you. It belonged to your grandparents, whether they were Amish or English or anything else. And taking it back is one of the simplest, most powerful things you can do. Now, let me tell you about one safety thing before we wrap up, because I take this seriously. If you're using wood for your raised beds, make sure it's untreated. No pressure-treated lumber. The older stuff, before 2004, was treated with a chemical called CCA, chromated copper arsenic, in the wood. You don't want that leaching into soil that you're growing food in. The newer pressure-treated lumber uses different chemicals, and there's debate about how much actually gets into the soil, but in my opinion, why take the chance? Use untreated wood or cedar or metal or stone. And if you're using old pallets, look for a stamp that says HT, which means heat treated. Avoid anything stamped MB, which means methyl bromide, a chemical fumigant. This is real. Check the stamp. And one more thing, when you're watering, especially seedlings, use clean water. If you're on a well, that's usually fine. If you're on city water, let it sit in an open bucket for a day before using it. That gives the chlorine time to off-gas. Chlorine kills bacteria, and some of those bacteria are the good ones that your soil needs. It's a small thing, but it matters over time. So here's what I want you to do this week. Step 1, walk outside. Find the sunniest spot close to your kitchen door. That's where your garden goes. Step 2, get yourself a raised bed, or build one, or improvise one. Get it at least 12 inches tall. Taller if you can. Leave 30 inches between beds. Step 3, fill the bottom half with logs, sticks, branches, and cardboard. Fill the top half with a good raised bed potting mix or potting soil. Read the ingredients. Make sure you've got fertility, drainage, and retention. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Step 4, plant what you eat. Herbs go in the sunniest spot. Mediterranean herbs together. Strawberries get their flowers cut off until May. Lettuce, spinach, and greens get planted with staggered spacing and staggered timing so you don't get it all at once. Cabbage gets 18 inches between plants. Bury those floppy stems a touch deeper for stability. Step 5, start seeds indoors for your warm season crops. Seedling mix, 1/4 inch deep, 1 seed per cell. Keep it warm and moist. Light as soon as they sprout. Don't overwater. Transplant when they're strong and the weather allows it. That's the whole thing. That's a garden. You can do every bit of this in a single weekend and then spend the rest of the season watching it grow and feeding yourself from it. My mother used to say that a garden teaches you more about patience and honesty than church does. I wouldn't go that far. But she wasn't entirely wrong. Now, I've got 2 questions for you, and I want you to answer them in the comments because I read every single one. First, what's the one thing that's been stopping you, sir, from starting a garden? Tell me, because I promise you, whatever it is, it's smaller than you think. And second, if you grew up with someone who gardened, a grandmother, a mother, a father, an uncle, anyone, tell me what they grew. Tell me what you remember, because that's the kind of knowledge that disappears if nobody writes it down, and these comments are a place where it can live. Come back and tell me what happened. Show up in a month and let me know what sprouted. I'll be here. Good luck in the garden, and keep on growing.